Lee Min-ho sat in the quiet archive room, surrounded by screens showing old records from 300 years ago. The blue light from the displays made his tired eyes hurt, but he could not stop reading. Every document told the same terrible story. Humanity had been betrayed. The young historian touched the screen, pulling up the trial records. He watched the grainy footage of human ambassadors standing before the Galactic Council. They looked so desperate, so helpless. Behind them, the Quarian representatives stood tall and confident, their scaled faces showing no emotion. The humans committed genocide, the Quarian prosecutor said in the recording. His voice was calm and cold. They destroyed the Velthon colony on Theta 9. 40 million innocent lives. We have proof. Lee Min-ho had seen that proof. He had spent months analyzing every piece of evidence. It was all fake. The energy signatures were wrong. The timeline did not match. Even the supposed human ships in the attack had registration numbers that did not exist in any human database. The Quarians had created everything. They had lied to the entire galaxy. But 300 years ago, nobody listened to humanity's defense. The Quarian Empire was too powerful. They controlled the largest military fleet in known space. 57 species depended on Quarian protection. When the Quarians said humans were dangerous, the Council believed them. When humans showed their evidence, the Council ignored it. Lee Min-ho closed the trial footage and opened another file. This one showed the evacuation. 40 billion humans fleeing their homes in a desperate exodus. Ships of every size and shape filled the screens. Military vessels, colony transports, mining barges, even personal yachts. Anything that could fly and carry people was pressed into service. The historian heard footsteps behind him. Captain Park Soo-jin entered the archive room, her military uniform crisp and clean despite the late hour. "Still studying the old wounds?" Park asked. Her voice was gentle but tired. She understood his obsession. Her grandmother had died during the Exodus, crushed in a stampede when too many people tried to board a transport ship. "Someone has to remember the truth," Lee Min-ho said. He gestured at the screens. "The galaxy thinks we died. They think the exile killed us. But we survived. We built something amazing. And they need to know what really happened." Park pulled up a chair and sat beside him. She looked at the evacuation footage, and her jaw tightened. "My grandmother was on that station," she said, pointing at one of the screens. "She was trying to reach the transport docks when the crush happened. She saved 3 children by lifting them over her head before she fell." Lee Min-ho reached over and squeezed her hand. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the chaos of humanity's darkest day. "The Council gave us 72 hours to leave known space," Park continued. Her voice was bitter now. 72 hours to abandon colonies we had built over centuries, to leave behind everything we had created. And where were we supposed to go? They did not care. They just wanted us gone. Close. 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 Lee Min-ho pulled up another file. This one showed a star map. A young human captain appeared on screen, her face dirty and exhausted. She was broadcasting to the Exodus fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Chen of the Advanced Scout Group," the woman said. "We have found something. Coordinates are being transmitted now. There is a massive nebula at the galactic edge. Our sensors cannot penetrate it. Neither can anyone else's. If we go in there, they will never find us." "The Shroud Nebula," Lee Min-ho said softly. "Our salvation," Park nodded. "And our prison. For 300 years. The footage continued. The massive human fleet approached the nebula. It stretched across space, like a purple and blue wall of gas and dust and energy. It was beautiful and terrifying. Inside that cloud, sensors did not work. Communication was difficult. Navigation was nearly impossible. It was a death trap, or it was a new beginning. "Elder Counselor Choi was there," Park said, pointing at another ship in the formation. He watched his homeworld disappear behind them as the fleet entered the nebula. He told me once that he cried for 3 days straight. Lee Min-ho switched to more recent files. These showed what humanity had built inside the Shroud Nebula. 47 star systems now held human colonies. Over 200 stations orbited various worlds and asteroids. The population had grown from 40 billion to more than 60 billion. Humanity had not just survived. They had thrived. But they had also changed. Isolated from the galaxy, forced to adapt to the nebula's strange conditions, humanity had developed technology unlike anything the Council species used, phase shift drives that moved ships without using hyperspace, gravitational manipulation systems that could build stations in impossible locations, quantum-anchored communications that worked even through the densest nebula clouds. The Commonwealth of Free Worlds governed it all. Every human colony had a voice. Every station sent representatives. Democracy had replaced the old corporate federations and nation-states. Shared suffering had united humanity in ways that peace never could. An alarm suddenly beeped on Lee Min-ho's console. He frowned and pulled up the alert. His eyes went wide. "Park, you need to see this," he said urgently. The captain leaned forward, reading the message. Her face went pale. "A Quarian scout ship," she whispered. "It breached the nebula's outer edge. Our patrol captured it 3 hours ago." Lee Min-ho felt his heart racing. Do they know? Did the scout send any messages before we caught it? Park was already pulling up more information on her personal tablet. She read quickly, her expression growing more concerned with each passing second. "The pilot is alive. He is in detention on Station 17. The ship had an emergency beacon. It activated automatically when the ship entered distress." She looked up at Lee Min-ho, and he saw fear in her eyes. "The beacon broadcast for 47 minutes before we could shut it down. Then they know," Lee Min-ho said. His voice was hollow. "After 300 years of hiding, the Quarians know. We are here." Park stood abruptly. "I need to inform the Council immediately. This changes everything." Lee Min-ho watched her leave, then turned back to his screens. The trial footage was still playing on loop. The Quarian prosecutor's cold voice echoed through the archive room. Humanity had been forgotten by the galaxy, exiled to die in the void. But they had survived. They had built an empire in the darkness, hidden from the eyes of those who had betrayed them. Now the secret was out. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn the truth. Humanity had not died in the Shroud Nebula. They had been reborn. The Commonwealth Council chamber was packed with representatives from all 47 human systems. Lee Min-ho stood in the observer gallery, watching as the debate raged below. Captain Park Soo-jin sat at the military advisor's table, her face calm, but her hands gripping the edge of the desk tightly. Elder Counselor Choi spoke first. He was 93 years old now, but his voice still carried strength and anger across the chamber. "They exiled us. They called us murderers. They took everything from us." The old man's hands shook as he pointed at the display, showing the captured Quarian scout ship. "Now one of them stumbles into our home, and we debate what to do? The answer is simple. We remain hidden. We let them wonder. And if they come looking, we defend what we have built." Several counselors nodded in agreement. Lee Min-ho understood their fear. For 300 years, safety had meant invisibility. The nebula protected humanity because nobody knew they were there. But another voice rose from the chamber floor. Kim Da-yoon, a young diplomatic corps officer, stepped forward to speak. She was only 30 years old, part of the generation born inside the nebula. To her, the exile was history, not memory. "With respect, Elder Counselor, hiding is no longer an option," Kim said. Her voice was steady and clear. "The Quarian beacon broadcast our location for 47 minutes. Even if we destroy every trace of that ship, questions will be asked. A Quarian military vessel entered the nebula and never came out. They will investigate. Then we destroy their investigation fleet too, another counselor shouted. Kim shook her head. And then another fleet comes. And another. How long can we fight before they bring enough ships to overwhelm us? How long before our home becomes a battlefield? Park Soo-jin stood. The chamber fell quiet. Everyone respected the captain. She had commanded the outer defense forces for 10 years. Kim is right, Park said. But so is Elder Choi. We are not ready for open war with the Korean Empire. They command thousands of warships. We have built a strong defense fleet, yes, but we number in the hundreds, not thousands. Then what do you suggest, Captain? Someone asked. Park turned to look at Lee Min-ho in the gallery. Their eyes met, and he saw her make a decision. We tell the truth, Park said simply. Not to the Koreans, to everyone else. We broadcast what really happened 300 years ago. We show the galaxy the evidence of the Korean conspiracy. We let the other species judge for themselves. The chamber erupted in noise. Some counselors shouted in approval. Others argued against it. Elder Choi rose from his seat, his face dark with anger. You want to trust them? He shouted. The same council that exiled us? The same species that stood by and let the Quarians lie? No. Park replied calmly. I do not trust them. But I believe in the power of truth. And I believe that some species in the council will listen. The Quarians have grown more aggressive over the centuries. We know this from the intelligence we have gathered. They have bullied smaller species. They have taken resources by force. How many others are tired of their tyranny? Lee Min-ho felt his heart racing. This was the moment he had worked toward for years. He had gathered the evidence. He had documented every lie. If the council gave the word, he would finally get to show the galaxy what humanity had discovered. Kim Da-eun spoke again. I have studied the current galactic political situation. 23 species have filed complaints against the Korean Empire in the last 50 years alone. Trade disputes, border conflicts, unexplained military actions. The Quarians have made enemies. We could find allies. Or we could paint a target on ourselves, Elder Choi said, but his voice was quieter now. He sat down slowly, suddenly looking very old and very tired. The vote was called. It was close. 24 systems voted to reveal humanity's existence. 21 voted to remain hidden. 2 abstained. The decision was made. Humanity would emerge from the shadows. After the vote, Lee Min-ho went to the detention facility on Station 17. He had requested permission to interview the Quarian pilot. The guards led him to a comfortable room where the alien sat, looking confused and frightened. Thex Kovar was young for a Quarian. His scales were still bright green, not yet faded by age. When Lee Min-ho entered, the pilot stood quickly, his body tense. I am not here to hurt you, Lee Min-ho said gently. He sat down and gestured for the Quarian to do the same. I just want to talk. Thex Kovar sat slowly, his eyes never leaving Lee Min-ho. You are human, he said, his voice full of disbelief. But humans died out. Everyone knows this. You went into the nebula 300 years ago and never came out. We came out, Lee Min-ho said. We just did not leave. We built a new home inside. Tell me, what do your people teach about why humanity was exiled? The Quarian looked uncomfortable. You committed genocide. You destroyed the Velthon colony. Killed millions. The council had no choice but to remove you from civilized space. Lee Min-ho pulled out a tablet and placed it on the table between them. He began showing files, evidence, analysis, proof of the conspiracy. Your empire lied, Lee Min-ho said quietly. We never attacked the Velthon. The Quarians did. They framed us because they wanted to remove humanity as a potential rival. We were growing too fast, building too many colonies. Your leaders saw us as a threat. Thex Kovar stared at the evidence, his face cycling through emotions. Confusion, disbelief, doubt. Then, slowly, Something that might have been horror. "I am a scout pilot," he said weakly. "I just fly my ship. I follow orders. I did not know." "Most of your people probably do not know," Lee Min-ho agreed. "But your leaders do. And now, we are going to tell everyone else." Meanwhile, in the military command center, Park Soo-jin reviewed the fleet readiness reports. 50 ships from across all human systems were being assembled. Not a war fleet, but a diplomatic mission, big enough to defend itself, but clearly not an invasion force. Her second officer approached. "Captain, the engineers say it will take 2 weeks to prepare the phase shift drives for coordinated emergence. We have never tried to have 50 ships exit the nebula simultaneously at different locations." "We have 2 weeks then," Park said. "I want every ship checked 3 times. No mistakes. When we reveal ourselves to the galaxy, we need to show strength and confidence." "And if the Quarians attack?" the officer asked. Park smiled grimly. "Then they will learn what 300 years of isolation has taught us. We are not the helpless refugees they exiled. We are something new. Something stronger." Across the Commonwealth, preparations began. Lee Min-ho worked with a team of historians and technical experts to compile the evidence package. It had to be perfect, clear enough for any species to understand, backed by irrefutable proof. Kim Da-eun contacted her intelligence network, gathering information on every species in the council. Who might be sympathetic? Who were the Quarians' strongest allies? Who could be convinced to listen? Elder Choi watched it all from his quarters on the archive ship. He had voted against revelation, but now that the decision was made, he would support it. That was how democracy worked, but deep inside, he was afraid. He remembered the exodus, the terror, the loss, and he feared that humanity was about to face that darkness again. 2 weeks passed quickly. The 50 ships of the First Contact Fleet gathered at the nebula's edge. Each one carried part of humanity's message. Each one would emerge in a different location near Council space. Park stood on the bridge of the flagship. Lee Min-ho was beside her, carrying the master copy of the evidence. Kim Da-eun coordinated with the other ships, ensuring everyone was ready. "All ships report ready," Kim said. Park took a deep breath. "Then let us show the galaxy that humanity never died. Begin phase shift. It is time to come home." The broadcast began at exactly the same moment across 50 locations. Human ships emerged from phase shift near major trade routes, communication hubs, and council stations. Every ship immediately transmitted the same message on all known frequencies, in every recognized galactic language. Lee Min-ho stood in the broadcast chamber, speaking into the camera. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly as he held his notes. 300 years ago, humanity was exiled from known space, he began. The Galactic Council declared us too dangerous to exist among civilized species. They said we committed genocide. They said we destroyed an entire colony world. They said we were monsters. He paused, letting the words sink in across thousands of worlds. They lied. Behind him, screens began showing documents. Evidence. Communication intercepts. Energy signature analysis. Everything humanity had gathered over 3 centuries of careful research. The Quarian Empire fabricated the entire case against humanity, Lee Min-ho continued. They destroyed the Velthon colony themselves and blamed us. They created false evidence. They pressured the council to act quickly, before anyone could verify their claims. Why? Because humanity was growing too powerful. Our colonies were thriving. Our technology was advancing. We were becoming rivals to Quarian dominance. On the bridge, Captain Park watched the communication boards light up with incoming signals. Some were demands that they stop broadcasting. Others were requests for more information. Many were simply confused questions. "Captain, we are receiving a direct message from the Quarian Military Command," her communications officer reported. "They are demanding we cease transmission immediately and return to the nebula." "Ignore it," Park said. Keep broadcasting. Lee Min-ho's broadcast continued. He showed the original trial footage, then presented the analysis proving the evidence was false. He showed communication records between Quarian military officials discussing the frame-up. He showed energy signatures from the destroyed colony that matched Quarian weapons, not human ones. We have lived in the Shroud Nebula for 3 centuries, Lee Min-ho said. We survived. We built a new civilization. We grew stronger. But we never forgot what was done to us. We never stopped searching for the truth. He looked directly into the camera, and his voice grew stronger. We are humanity. We are still here, and we demand that the galaxy hear the truth. The broadcast played on loop for 6 hours straight. By then, it had reached nearly every inhabited system in Council space. Reactions varied wildly. On the Raxian homeworld, a major trade power, the government immediately ordered an independent investigation. They had suffered under Quarian trade restrictions for decades. The possibility that the Quarians had lied about humanity made them question everything else. The Telquarian Empire, a close Quarian ally, dismissed the broadcast as human propaganda. Their leaders refused to even review the evidence, but other species were not so quick to dismiss humanity's claims. The scientific community, in particular, began analyzing the evidence package. Independent researchers from a dozen species started publishing their findings. The energy signatures were indeed wrong. The timeline did not match. The evidence against humanity had serious problems. Then something unexpected happened. A transmission came from the Velthon homeworld. The species that humanity had supposedly genocide 300 years ago. Their leader, an elderly being named Sethis Vor, appeared on every major galactic channel. We are the Velthon, Sethis Vor said, his voice heavy with old pain. 300 years ago, our colony on Theta 9 was destroyed. 40 million of our people died. The Galactic Council told us that humans were responsible. They told us justice had been served when humanity was exiled. The old Velthon's face grew harder. They lied to us too. We always had doubts. The evidence never felt complete. But we were grieving, and we wanted someone to blame. Now, humanity has shown us what really happened. Quarian ships destroyed our colony. Quarian weapons killed our people. And the Quarian Empire blamed another species to hide their crime. Kim Da-un, watching the Velthon broadcast from her station, felt tears in her eyes. She had not expected this. Nobody had. The Velthon people stand with humanity, Sethis Vor declared. We demand a full council investigation. We demand accountability. And we demand that the galaxy recognize what was done to both our species. The Galactic Council went into emergency session. Species that had remained neutral suddenly had to choose sides. The Quarians tried to dismiss both the human and Velthon claims, but their denials sounded weak. Then the Council made a decision. They would send a peacekeeping force to the nebula's edge. They would investigate. They would hear humanity's full testimony. But the Quarian Empire was not willing to accept investigation. Admiral Zethix Moore, commander of the Quarian border fleets, received his orders directly from the Empress herself. The message was simple and brutal. Humanity cannot be allowed to destabilize the Empire. Their claims threaten our authority. Destroy them before this goes any further. 3 days after humanity's broadcast, Admiral Zethix Moore assembled his fleet. 200 warships. The most powerful military force in that region of space. His orders were clear. Jump to the nebula's edge. Deliver an ultimatum. If humanity refused to retreat back into the nebula and cease all communication, destroy them. On the human flagship, Park's sensors detected the Quarian fleet assembling. She watched the readings carefully, her tactical mind assessing the threat. They outnumber us almost 4 to 1, her tactical officer said nervously. Numbers are not everything, Park replied, but she felt the weight of command heavy on her shoulders. She had hoped for more time, hoped that the truth would be enough to prevent violence. She had been naive. All ships, Prepare for combat, Park ordered. Defensive formation. Protect the diplomatic vessels. And send a message to the Commonwealth. Tell them the Quarians are coming. Lee Min-ho stood beside her on the bridge. He had never been in combat before. The historian in him wanted to document everything. The human in him was simply terrified. Will we win? He asked quietly. Park looked at him. Our ships are more advanced. Our technology is better. But they have numbers and experience. This will not be easy. Kim Da-eun worked frantically at the communication station. She was sending messages to every species that had shown sympathy to humanity's cause. Some were responding. The Velthan were sending ships. A few smaller species were offering support. But it would take time for help to arrive. Time they might not have. The Quarian fleet jumped to the nebula's edge right on schedule. 200 massive warships appeared in formation, their weapons powered and ready. The human fleet of 50 ships looked tiny in comparison. Admiral Zethix Moore opened a channel. His scaled face appeared on every human ship's main screen. Humans of the Commonwealth, the Admiral said, his voice cold and formal. You have violated the terms of your exile. You have spread lies and propaganda against the Quarian Empire. You have exactly 1 hour to retreat back into the nebula and agree to permanent isolation. If you refuse, you will be destroyed. Park muted the channel and looked at her crew. Then she looked at Lee Min-ho and Kim Da-eun. This is it, she said quietly. This is the moment we find out if truth matters more than power. She unmuted the channel and faced the Quarian Admiral. Admiral Zethix Moore. We will not retreat. We will not be silent. The truth has been revealed, and nothing you do here can hide it again. If you attack us, the galaxy will see who truly deserves to be called monsters. The Admiral's face showed no emotion. You have made your choice. My conscience is clear. You brought this on yourselves. The channel closed. For a moment, space was silent. 2 fleets facing each other across the void. Then the Quarians opened fire. The battle for humanity's future had begun. The first Quarian missiles streaked across space toward the human fleet. Admiral Zethix Moore watched from his flagship's bridge, confident in his overwhelming numerical advantage. He had fought many battles in his long career. This one would be short. He was wrong. Captain Park's hands moved across her command console. All ships, phase shift on my mark. Pattern Delta 7. The human fleet seemed to flicker and disappear. One moment they were in front of the Quarian formation. The next moment they were scattered in a dozen different locations, completely out of the Quarian firing solution. The missiles flew through empty space and detonated harmlessly. Admiral Zethix Moore blinked in confusion. What just happened? The human ships moved, sir, his tactical officer reported, studying the sensors frantically. But not through hyperspace. Our sensors show they simply changed position instantly. That is impossible, the Admiral said. Park smiled grimly on the human flagship bridge. Welcome to 300 years of technological evolution, she said softly. Then, louder. All ships, target their weapon systems. Gravitational pulse. Minimum power. Disable. Do not destroy. The human ships fired. But instead of energy beams or missiles, they released focused gravitational waves. The Quarians had never seen weapons like these. They had been developed to work in the nebula's intense gravity fields, where conventional weapons often failed. The gravitational pulses hit the Quarian ships, and their shields collapsed. Power systems flickered. Weapon batteries went offline. 20 Quarian warships were suddenly floating helpless in space, completely disabled, but with their crews unharmed. Impossible, Admiral Zethix Moore whispered again. Then, shouting, all remaining ships, spread formation. Target those human vessels. Fire everything. The Quarian fleet adjusted. 180 warships unleashed a massive barrage. Space lit up with energy beams and missile contrails. Surely no force could survive such an attack, but the human ships phase shifted again. They appeared behind the Quarian formation. They appeared above it. They appeared in the gaps between ships. They were everywhere and nowhere. Impossible to track, impossible to hit. Lee Min-ho gripped his console tightly, fighting to keep his stomach under control. The phase shift felt strange, like reality was bending around them. "How are we doing this?" he asked. 300 years in the nebula taught us to think differently about space and movement, Park explained, even as she coordinated the fleet's next maneuver. The Quarians still rely on hyperspace technology, which has its limits. We learned to manipulate phase variance instead. It is slower than hyperspace for long distances. But in combat range, it makes us impossible to target. Another gravitational pulse disabled 15 more Quarian ships. Admiral Zethix Moore felt panic rising in his chest for the first time in decades. His mighty fleet was being picked apart by a force a quarter its size. Worse, the humans were not even trying to kill his crews. They were just disabling ships, leaving them floating helplessly in space. It was humiliating. "Send a distress signal to Quarian High Command," he ordered. "Tell them we need reinforcements. These humans are not what we expected." But Park had anticipated this. Human cyber warfare specialists, trained in the quantum-anchored systems developed in the nebula, had been quietly infiltrating Quarian communications since the battle began. "Captain, we have intercepted the Quarian distress call," Kim Da-eun reported. "Shall we jam it?" Park hesitated for just a moment. If she jammed the signal, the Quarians would know humans could breach their secure channels. But if she let it through, more Quarian ships would come. "Let it through," she decided. "But make sure everyone else hears it too. Broadcast it on open channels. Let the galaxy know the Quarians are losing to the primitive exiles they tried to destroy." Kim's fingers flew across her console. Seconds later, Admiral Zethix Moore's panicked distress call was being broadcast across dozens of star systems. The battle continued. The human fleet used the nebula itself as a weapon, luring Quarian ships close to its edge, where their sensors failed completely. Human ships, designed to operate in the nebula's conditions, had no such problems. They could see perfectly, while the Quarians flew blind. 30 more Quarian ships were disabled. Then something unexpected happened. New ships began arriving at the battlefield. But they were not Quarian reinforcements. The Velthon had sent their fleet. It was small, only 12 ships, but they positioned themselves alongside the humans. Sethis Vor's face appeared on Park's communication screen. "We owe humanity a debt 300 years old," the Velthon leader said. "Today, we begin to repay it. Our weapons are at your command, Captain." Park felt emotion welling up inside her but pushed it down. "Welcome, friends. Form up on our right flank. Watch for Quarian missile attacks." More ships arrived. The Raxian Trade Federation sent 20 vessels. The Mintharan Assembly sent 8. Small species that had suffered under Quarian dominance for decades saw their chance to strike back. Admiral Zethix Moore watched in horror as his numerical advantage evaporated. His fleet was down to 100 operational ships. The human-led coalition now numbered 90 vessels, and his ships were still being disabled one by one. "Admiral, we should retreat," his second officer urged. "We cannot win this battle." "Retreat?" Zethix Moore roared. "The Quarian military does not retreat. We are the most powerful force in the galaxy. These humans are nothing but refugees. We will not be defeated by them." His words cut off as the human flagship phase shifted directly in front of his own ship. The human vessel was smaller than his mighty warship, but somehow more threatening. Park opened a direct channel. "Admiral Zethix Moore, you have a choice. Order your remaining ships to power down and surrender, or we will disable them all. You cannot win. You know this now. Stop this before more beings die needlessly." The Admiral stared at her. His pride screamed at him to refuse. His training demanded he fight to the last ship, but his tactical mind knew the truth. He had lost. You are primitives, he said weakly. Park's expression was hard. You exiled us to die. Instead, we thrived. You left us alone in the darkness. We learned to see in it. You thought isolation would destroy us. It made us stronger. That is what humanity does, Admiral. We survive. We adapt. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Admiral Zethixmore slumped in his command chair. All Quarian ships, he said tiredly. Power down weapons. Prepare to be boarded and detained. The battle is over. Throughout the Quarian fleet, ships began shutting down their weapon systems. Some officers protested. A few tried to fight on, but most simply surrendered, exhausted and defeated. Lee Min-ho was broadcasting the entire battle. Every species in Council space could watch as the mighty Quarian military was beaten by the humans they had exiled. The historian in him knew this moment would change the galaxy forever. Kim Da-eun was already coordinating with the coalition forces, organizing the processing of Quarian prisoners and disabled ships. The diplomatic challenges were just beginning. Then her console beeped with a priority alert. She read it, and her face went pale. Captain, she said urgently. Our long-range sensors have detected massive movement in Quarian home space. Their main war fleet is mobilizing. Park looked at the reading. Her heart sank. 3,000 ships, the entire might of the Quarian Empire, preparing to move. They had won this battle. But the war was just beginning. On the archive ship, Elder Counselor Choi watched footage of the battle. He saw human ships dancing through space. He saw the coalition forming. He saw the Quarians surrender. And he wept. Not from sadness, from relief, from pride. Humanity had proven itself worthy. Not through conquest, not through cruelty, but through skill and determination, and the choice to disable rather than destroy. But as he wiped his eyes, he saw the same report Kim had seen. 3,000 Quarian warships, moving toward Commonwealth space. The old man stood slowly, his joints aching. He had voted against revelation. He had wanted to stay hidden. But humanity had chosen truth. Now they would pay the price. And he would stand with them, whatever came next. The galaxy was watching. The truth was revealed. And the Quarian Empire, faced with the collapse of its authority, was preparing for total war. 3 months passed after the battle at the nebula's edge. 3 months of frantic preparation. 3 months of diplomacy and alliance building. 3 months of watching the Quarian war fleet slowly gather its strength. Lee Min-ho stood in the Commonwealth War Council chamber, presenting his latest intelligence findings. Around him sat representatives from 30 species. What had started as a human defense had become something much larger. The Quarian Empress has staked everything on this assault, Lee Min-ho explained, displaying star charts and fleet movements. She cannot allow our revelation to stand. If the truth about the frame-up becomes accepted fact, her entire empire collapses. Species that have lived under Quarian dominance for centuries will rebel. Her only option is to destroy us so completely that our claims die with us. Kim Da-eun added her analysis. We have secured formal alliances with 17 species. Another 13 have sent ships to support the defense, though they will not commit to formal alliance. That gives us approximately 800 warships. Against 3,000, someone muttered. Against 3,000, Kim agreed. The numbers are not in our favor. But we have advantages the Quarians do not. Captain Park stood and activated the tactical display. It showed the nebula and the space around it. We will fight at the nebula's edge. It is our home territory. Our ships can phase shift into the nebula and back out. Quarian ships cannot follow without becoming hopelessly lost. We can use it for cover, for surprise attacks, for retreat if necessary. You are talking about guerrilla warfare, the Raxian ambassador said. I am talking about survival, Park replied. Elder Counselor Choi spoke from his seat. His voice was weak now. The stress of the past months had taken its toll on the old man's health. And if we lose? What then? Lest. What? What? The chamber fell silent. Lee Min-ho was the one who answered. Then we lose. But the truth is already out there. Even if every human dies, the galaxy knows what the Quarians did. Other species will carry on our fight. That is why we had to reveal ourselves, Elder. Not just to survive, but to ensure the truth survives. Choi nodded slowly. I understand now. I was wrong to vote for silence. Sometimes, the only way forward is through the fire. Preparations intensified. Human engineers worked with allied species to share technology. Phase shift drives were too complex to install on other ships quickly. But gravitational weapons could be adapted. Sensor systems were upgraded across the coalition fleet. Kim Da-eun spent every waking hour on diplomatic channels. She was building something unprecedented. A true coalition against tyranny. Species that had never worked together were training their crews side by side. Ancient rivals were setting aside disputes to face a common enemy. Meanwhile, Lee Min-ho made one final discovery. His cyber warfare team, hacking deep into Quarian secure networks, found something extraordinary. Captain Park, you need to see this, he said urgently, bursting into her ready room. Park looked up from fleet readiness reports. She was exhausted, but Lee Min-ho's excitement cut through her fatigue. We found the Empress's personal archives, Lee Min-ho explained, pulling up files on the room's display. Communications from 300 years ago. She was not Empress then, but she was a high-ranking military commander, and she personally ordered the destruction of the Velthon colony. She personally created the frame-up against humanity. Park's eyes widened. Can you prove it? Every communication is authenticated with her personal encryption key. It is absolutely genuine. Lee Min-ho smiled grimly. The Empress herself ordered the genocide, then blamed us. Empress, this is not just some conspiracy by lower officials. It goes to the very top. Can we broadcast this? Park asked. Already prepared, Lee Min-ho said. Waiting for your order. Park thought for only a moment. Do it. Right now. Before the battle begins. Let every Quarian officer and crew member know exactly who they are fighting for. The broadcast went out across all channels. Lee Min-ho narrated again. But this time, he presented the Empress's own words. Her orders to destroy the Velthon colony. Her instructions on how to fabricate evidence against humanity. Her concerns about human expansion threatening Quarian dominance. 300 years of lies, exposed in her own voice. The effect was immediate and devastating. In the Quarian fleet, officers began questioning their orders. Some refused to continue. Entire ships broke formation and retreated back to Quarian space. The crews were not willing to fight and die to protect their Empress's crimes, but the majority remained. 3,000 ships became 2,400, still an overwhelming force, and their commanders were the most loyal, the most committed to the Empire, regardless of its sins. They jumped to the nebula's edge on schedule. The Battle of the Shroud began. From the start, it was chaos. The Quarians came in massive formations, trying to overwhelm the coalition through sheer numbers. But the coalition did not fight like a traditional fleet. Human ships phase-shifted in and out of the nebula, appearing behind Quarian lines, disabling ships, then vanishing before the Quarians could respond. Velthon ships used their own unique technology, quantum anchor missiles that could track targets through dimensional shifts. Raxian vessels formed defensive screens, their shields the strongest in the galaxy. Park commanded from the human flagship, coordinating hundreds of ships across a battle space that stretched for thousands of kilometers. Her tactical brilliance, developed through 3 centuries of theoretical study and simulation, finally had a real test. Group Delta, phase shift to coordinates 77 Alpha, she ordered. Group Epsilon, gravitational bombardment on the Quarian flagship cluster. Group Zeta, Screen the medical ships. Keep our casualties away from the fighting. Lee Min-ho broadcast the entire battle. Every species in the galaxy watched in real time as the coalition fought for its survival. He made sure they saw not just the combat, but the purpose. The coalition ships disabled when they could. They offered surrender. They rescued Quarian escape pods. Kim Da-eun worked diplomatic miracles even in the middle of battle. When a group of Quarian ships tried to surrender, she coordinated their safe passage through the battle lines. When Allied ships took damage, she arranged for their retreat to repair stations. The battle raged for 16 hours. Ship after ship was disabled or destroyed on both sides. The space around the nebula became a graveyard of metal and debris. Then the tide turned. The Telkorian Empire, the Quarians' strongest remaining ally, suddenly withdrew from the battle. Their commander broadcast an explanation across all channels. "We have reviewed the evidence against the Empress," the Telkorian admiral said. "We cannot fight to defend a proven war criminal. The Telkorian fleet is withdrawing. We urge other Quarian allies to do the same." 400 ships left the battlefield. The Quarian advantage evaporated. Aboard the Quarian command ship, the fleet admiral realized he had lost. His Empress had lied. His allies had abandoned him. And the coalition he faced was not a collection of weak species, but a united force fighting for justice. He ordered the retreat. The Quarian fleet jumped away, limping back to their home space. They left behind 600 disabled ships and thousands of detained crew members. The coalition had won, but at a terrible cost. 140 coalition ships were destroyed. Thousands had died. In the War Council chamber, exhausted representatives embraced and wept. They had survived. Against impossible odds, they had survived. But the aftermath was just beginning. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The evidence against the Empress was irrefutable. She was arrested and brought to trial. The Quarian Empire fractured as member states declared independence. 100 years of tyranny collapsed in weeks. A new Galactic Council formed. This one included humanity. It included the Velthon. It included all the species that had fought in the coalition. The age of Quarian dominance was over. 6 months after the battle, Lee Min-ho published his complete history. It became required reading across the galaxy. Young beings of every species studied how humanity had survived, how truth had defeated tyranny, how unity had overcome oppression. Captain Park accepted command of the new multi-species defense coalition. Her job was to ensure no species would ever dominate others again. She approached it with the same careful determination she had shown throughout the crisis. Kim Da-eun became humanity's first representative to the new Galactic Council. At 30 years old, she was the youngest counselor in history, but she had earned her place through skill and dedication. Elder Counselor Choi lived just long enough to see the new era begin. He died peacefully in his sleep aboard the archive ship, finally able to let go of the pain he had carried for so long. At his funeral, representatives from 40 species came to honor the man who had survived humanity's darkest day and lived to see its brightest. The Shroud Nebula opened its borders. Other species could enter now, share technology, build together. The secrets humanity had developed in isolation became gifts to the galaxy. 10 years passed. The nebula's edge became a symbol of unity rather than exile. Mixed species stations orbited the phenomenon. Joint research facilities studied the unique conditions that had forced humanity to innovate. Cultural centers celebrated the diversity of galactic civilization. Lee Min-ho was an old man now, though not as old as Choi had been. He sat in the same archive room where his journey began, updating his histories with new developments. A young Quarian student entered, nervous and respectful. "Historian Lee," she asked, "I am writing a paper on the exile. May I ask you a question?" Lee Min-ho smiled and gestured for her to sit. "Of course. How did humans forgive us?" the student asked. "My people committed terrible crimes against yours. We exiled you. We tried to destroy you. Yet now, Humans and Quarians work together. How? Lee Min-ho was quiet for a moment, thinking. Finally, he spoke. We learned something in the nebula. Something about what it means to be human, but also what it means to be a thinking being anywhere in the universe. We learned that survival requires not just strength or intelligence, but the choice to be better than those who wronged us. He stood slowly, looking out the window at the bustling station beyond. Ships of a dozen species moved through space in harmony. Your Empress chose cruelty and lies. We could have chosen the same. We could have emerged from the nebula seeking revenge, wanting to hurt those who hurt us. But that would have made us exactly what the Quarians falsely claimed we were. Monsters. He turned back to the student. Instead, we chose truth. We chose justice. We chose mercy when we could have chosen slaughter. That is what makes us human. Not our technology, not our resilience, but our choice to build rather than destroy, to forgive rather than hate, to reach out rather than strike down. The young Quarian had tears in her eyes. I am so sorry for what my people did. I know, Lee Min-ho said gently. And your generation is building something better. That is all any of us can do. Learn from the past, but not be trapped by it. Build a future where exile and genocide are impossible because we stand together. The student nodded and left, her head full of new thoughts. Lee Min-ho returned to his work. Outside, the galaxy turned. Humans and aliens worked side by side. The age of exile was over. The age of unity had begun, and humanity, forgotten and exiled, had not just survived. They had shown the galaxy what forgiveness and determination could achieve. They had built an empire not of conquest, but of hope. That was the greatest victory of all.